2 months after The Dark Tower stunk up the multiplex, It came along and reminded all of us that it's possible to adapt a Stephen King story in a way that can be embraced by audiences and critics, to the tune of new box office records even. It's almost hard to blame Hollywood for getting it wrong so often, simply because there have been so many attempts at adaptations from wildly diverse source material, tackled by filmmakers with wide-ranging levels of talent. Stanley Kubrick, Frank Darabont, Brian De Palma. There have been some real heavy hitters who have smartly adapted the work of our favorite Maine-based, ultra-prolific author. But for every Stand By Me, it seems like there are a dozen Maximum Overdrives. Here's a look at the 10 worst Stephen King movies. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe to MovieWeb to keep up with the conversation about all of the things we love. And now, in no particular order, The Dark Tower. Rotten Tomatoes is littered with green-splattered Stephen King movies, but The Dark Tower seems like a particularly egregious entry, if for no other reason than the sheer audacity of its ambitions. After all, The Dark Tower is a beloved series, and to try to delve into that mythology in a single movie, whether they intended to build a franchise around it or not, simply fell flat in this era of prestige television shows and shared cinematic universes. The New York Times said Idris Elba was the only thing anchoring this mess of a movie, but unfortunately, even he couldn't redeem it. The Running Man. Now don't get us wrong, The Running Man is certainly fun in a kitschy sort of way. We're fond of Arnold Schwarzenegger's yellow tracksuit, and the performances from late game show host Richard Dawson and Arnold's fellow ex-governor and Predator teammate Jesse Ventura are pretty sweet as well. Screenwriter Stephen E. D'Souza commands our eternal respect and gratitude as one of the names involved with Die Hard and 48 Hours, even if he was also involved with Beverly Hills Cop 3. But his meddling with King's source material just doesn't work here. The Running Man feels hastily slapped together, rushing toward one corny villain to another, even as it attempts to deal with some pretty big themes about Big Brother and television. All of it very loosely based on one of the novels King wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. Sleepwalkers. We can't always blame the screenwriter. Sleepwalkers was actually made from an original script by Stephen King himself. Mick Garris directed the 1992 film fresh off such esteemed films as Critters 2, the main course, and Psycho 4, the beginning. Sleepwalkers is terrible, yet Garris kept getting called back to work on King stuff, like the TV miniseries adaptations of The Stand, The Shining, and Bag of Bones, and the snooze fest that was Riding the Bullet, a movie that thinks it's profound, but is not. Graveyard Shift. This story about a bunch of overnight mill workers picked off one by a giant rat is exactly the kind of thing that works as a Stephen King short story, but immediately falls apart when stretched out to a feature-length, low-budget movie. Switching the giant rat to a giant bat didn't do Graveyard Shift any favors either. Silver Bullet. It must have been difficult to mess up a Stephen King werewolf story, but by golly, they found a way.
Maybe I like the next one better.
King wrote both the novella, Cycle of the Werewolf, and the much better named screenplay, but it's all completely ruined by awful special effects and either ham-fisted or lackluster performances by the likes of Gary Busey and the late Corey Haim, the kind of actors who were great in the right roles. Lest you think we're being unfair to the special effects simply because Silver Bullet was made in 1985, consider that American Werewolf in London was released in 1981, and it's awesome. Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher is one of several films on this list who have been the subject of our favorite movie podcast, How Did This Get Made? Like us, the hosts sort of loved watching The Running Man, even though they knew it was bad. And like us, they found Dreamcatcher incomprehensible. Director and co-writer Lawrence Kasdan gave us The Empire Strikes Back. Dreamcatcher stars Morgan Freeman, Thomas Jane, Timothy Olyphant, Jason Lee. But alas, as critic Richard Roper pointed out, not since Death to Smoochie have so many talented people made such a mess of things. So, if you've watched our video about the 10 best Stephen King movies, then you'll know that John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson's 1408 made it. Well, here they are again, but this time on the 10 worst list. 1408 is a wonderfully Kingish story about a writer staying in a supernaturally charged hotel and his descent into madness. Cell is a thriller about cell phones. Evil cell phones? How cell phones can turn us evil? At least King can say he wrote the book in 2006, but this movie was made in 2016. Maximum Overdrive. 30 years before Cell, a Stephen King movie warned us about evil devices and appliances of all sorts, from an ATM to a big semi-truck, emblazoned with the grinning visage of the Green Goblin, which is the only cool thing about this movie.
You like that, huh?
That and AC/DC. King has nobody to blame but himself for Maximum Overdrive, because he not only wrote it, but he directed it. And he's in the trailer, telling audiences all about it.
If you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself.
The Lawnmower Man. Wait, so is The Lawnmower Man about another machine given sentience by a passing comet and the radiation storm left in its wake? Nope. In fact, The Lawnmower Man has nothing to do with Stephen King at all. This garbage fire shares a title and a scene with the work of Stephen King, and that's it. King successfully sued the film's producers to have his name removed from it after they tried marketing it as Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. Jeff Fahey didn't bother to come back for this film's presumably even worse sequel, Lawnmower Man 2: Beyond Cyberspace. Which films are on your list of the 10 worst Stephen King movies? Do you have a persuasive argument to support the brilliance of Cell? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it with your friends. And be sure to subscribe to MovieWeb to stay up to date on the conversations about all of the things we love.